got we've got lots of great content to cover today, so we'll jump right in. So what we're doing today, and this is the second workshop. The one I did yesterday was on how to use market intel. Oh, great, Annie. Good to see you. What we did last time was we were talking about how to tap into the hidden job market, all the kind of tricks that I know and have been using for probably better part of 20 years to find jobs. This is sort of like the follow-up to that, because the ultimate outcome that you want to get from tapping into the hidden job market is to get warm introductions, which would hopefully lead to an information interview or something like that. So to be able to have a conversation with somebody about a job that you want to get. We're going to be recapping a bit of that content, but that's why we led to here, because after you've secured some meetings, you really need to do some additional prep to get ready for those meetings, so you really wow the crap out of them and make sure that they want to hire you on the spot. That's kind of the thing. I'm going to tell you some personal stories about how this has worked for me and people that I know. It's really, really, really good to prep. So let's jump in. So what we're going to be doing today, I'm going to go through an introduction. And for those of you who didn't make the Hidden Job Market webinar yesterday, we're going to do a quick recap of the key points that we talked about there. We're going to talk about what is an information interview. If you've never done one or you're a little shaky on exactly what one does in an information interview, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how to prepare for an information interview. I'm going to talk a lot about how to gather intel so that you look like a rock star in your information interview. And then once you have that intel, we're going to talk about how to prepare your research and analysis for that interview, so you know what your talking points are going to be. We'll talk a bit about the interview itself. And then we'll talk about what you do after the interview. Then we'll do some key takeaways, and then we should have lots of time for the Q&A session at the end. Last time we had about 40 minutes. I'm hoping we'll have about the same amount this time, because I think it was really helpful for a lot of folks. So we had some great discussions. So, introduction. Who am I? Some of you know me, some of you don't. Those of you who already know me and were at the talk yesterday, I apologize for the redundant stuff. So I did another talk yesterday on tapping into the hidden job market that's related to this talk. Me personally, I'm a market intelligence expert. I'm an impact business owner, so I'm a recovering B Corp, but I'm also a living wage employer, part of the Canadian Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also on the President's Group for Accessible Employment here in British Columbia, which helps workplaces find ways to make accommodations for employees with disabilities. So it's a real honor to be appointed to that by the government and to be involved. I'm also an aspiring university professor, so I'm supposed to be teaching my first part-time faculty position starting in January, but I'm on this education journey, so I'm just finishing up a second master's, and then I'm going to be going into my doctorate in January 2026. At some point I'll be a university professor. So part of this exercise is for me to get some practice at teaching a topic. Helping people with career stuff is not what I do for a living. This is just sort of something that I'm personally good at, and I've helped a lot of friends one-on-one with this kind of stuff. And I get enough questions about it, and I just sort of noticed lately that a lot of people are looking for work right now. So I just kind of went, it's probably time to do something like this to help folks out. So that's why we're doing this. And so really the reason why you're listening to me, I hope, is because I've done this and I've gotten jobs this way. So I want to teach you my tricks so you can help you too. So let's talk briefly about what we talked about yesterday in the Hidden Job Market 101 talk. So the first step really is to spend some time figuring out what kind of work you want to do, because a lot of times people fall into the trap of applying for jobs that have the same title or slightly more senior titles of ones that they've had before, and not really take the time to think about what they might want to do for, we spend so much time working, right? And if you're miserable at your job, my God, what a awful way to spend your life. So I think it's worth, if you're going through this process, to spend a bit of time trying to figure out what exactly you want to do. So the previous workshop, which, I'll make sure I put a link in to the chat here about the YouTube video of the other talk, but well worth spending some time figuring out what you want to do when you grow up. Once you know that, then the next step is you want to identify companies and industries that you want to work in based on the kind of work that you want to do. But again, I really emphasized in that workshop yesterday, do not think about job titles. Think about the actual work that you're going to do and what kind of companies need people to do that thing, right? Again, that webinar covers that in great detail. We'll make sure you get the link. Then the next step is to do your research to find out who you need to network with. So once you figure out what you want to do, what kind of companies and industries need someone like you to do that thing, you're going to have to do a bit of market intel research to figure out who it is that you need to connect with to get these warm introductions. Then you're going to network to get those warm introductions. And we talk in the workshop a lot about different ways to do that. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn, but there's other things like industry associations and your personal networks that you can leverage. But the key thing and why we're doing this second workshop is I said quite a few times, look, the ultimate goal here is to get information interviews so that you can have this warm, non-confrontational conversation with somebody to not ask for a job directly, but to try and get at a job indirectly. That's really the whole point of an information interview, is to connect to somebody who's going to connect you to the person that's going to hire you, or maybe a few extra steps. Then, of course, the last step is getting hired. Obviously, that's why a lot of us are here. We want a new job. We need a job, period, or we want to change jobs. That's the end goal. Let's get a job. So thank you, Peggy. That's what we covered last time. So I want to tell you a personal story about when I actually used this to get a job. So at the time, I was working as an associate vice president at Ipsos, which is a very large multinational market research company. And it just was not suiting my lifestyle. They were flying me all over North America to do sales pitches and to deliver work. And I had little children at home, so I was working like 70 hours a week. And sure, it was a 6-figure a year job, but my quality of life at the time was very poor. And I remember having this epiphany because one of the clients I was working with was Nintendo of America. And I think my big success metric that quarter was I'd helped them sell 0.8% more Pokemon cartridges. And I was, miserable. And so I just went, I got to do something meaningful. So I went out to my network and did a lot of the techniques that I talked about in the last workshop in terms of seeding my network with information that they could use to help me find a job. But one of the things I put out there was I said, I think I want to go into nonprofit leadership. I think that would be more fulfilling as a leadership role in the not-for-profit space. And one of the people in my network, who actually was a former employee of mine, told me, hey, have you heard of this place called The Hive, which was a nonprofit co-working space to support social enterprises? And I said, no, I had not heard of them, but it sounds cool. And he said, yeah, they're hiring for an executive director right now. And it was like one of those jobs that didn't really get posted anywhere. It was just sort of passed around through their network of people that they know. And so I would call something like that, if a job posting is not posted on a job board and it's just kind of sitting on some obscure website that nobody normally goes to, that's kind of hidden. So I wouldn't have stumbled across it because I'd never heard of this organization. I had no idea what they did. So my friend Sean said, yeah, go check it out. Now, what I did, and this is what we're going to be talking about a lot, is I secret shopped the place. So it had a physical location. Not every place you're going to check out has a physical location. But I went there in person, and it was a co-working space. So they were renting desks to people. So I went in and said, hey, I'm interested in renting a desk. They gave me the tour. I asked about how the staffing works. And well, we have a morning shift and we have an afternoon shift. And I went, bing, perfect. And came back another day in the afternoon and got another tour from somebody totally different. And so it was good because I got to get the perspective on different viewpoints on the place. And then I did a bit of research and found that I think it was on LinkedIn, I found that one of the board of directors was going to be outgoing. She was stepping down from the board. And I approached her almost like an information interview thing and said, hey, I am interested in learning about the Hive. I didn't tell her that I was applying for a job, but I just said, look, I'm interested in learning about the Hive. I'm in nonprofit leadership and I would love to pick your brain. And I say wit and charm, but basically I bought her enough drinks that she got quite drunk at dinner and told me probably things that she shouldn't have. I didn't want to get her in any trouble or anything like that, but I think she emailed me from her smartphone, like a copy of the annual financials for the first year. So I had a lot of material to work with by the time that dinner was finished. And then I started going around and looking for clients for them. So I just, as part of my research, say, well, who would be the kind of person that would rent desks here? So by the time I got to the interview, I'd seen their financials. I'd been on secret shopping tours of it a couple of times. I had all the information you'd want to have that you normally wouldn't have. And I did that through these techniques that I talked to today. So only after I had all that stuff did I apply for the job. I got shortlisted because obviously I put together a great application based on the information that I had. The interview went very well, and I was offered the job 40 minutes after I left the interview. I was actually on the subway home still, and hadn't even gotten home yet. And they called me up to say, "Do you want the job?" And I said, "Absolutely." And that was it. I worked there for 2 years, and it was a great job. But that was my personal story of how I leveraged these techniques to get in there. Now, let's talk about what an information interview actually is. So I'm going to talk about it in terms of the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, and why. So the who is an information interview. You want to have this with well-connected individuals who work at or can directly connect you to individuals in companies or industries that you're interested in. So it's not enough to target folks for these interviews who are just nice people with large networks. There has to be a strategic reason to target them. I'm suggesting that let's say it was the energy industry you're going after, like hydroelectricity. If you're talking to somebody who works in retail marketing, that's not the right person to talk to. You want to talk to somebody who has something to do with hydroelectricity in the energy industry, because they're going to know other people in that industry that they can connect you to. Maybe they've worked in the industry. Maybe they currently work in the industry, or they currently work at a company that you're looking for. But that's the kind of people that you want to target. The what is an information interview? So this is meant to be a discussion that is less formal than a job interview. You don't want it to be too formal. And I was talking to somebody a little earlier today who was in the first webinar that I just happened to have a meeting with for unrelated reasons. And they were saying that was sort of one of the big takeaways for them from that, was that to be able to put people at ease when you're approaching them about an information interview, you really want to make it clear that you're not asking them for a job. You're asking them for information. You're asking for advice. And we're going to talk about that more, but to put people at ease, you definitely want to make sure that they understand you're not begging for a job from them directly, because that makes people uncomfortable. You're trying to find workarounds to doing that. So where do these happen? These can happen in person. The one I talked about in my example yesterday was with Lisa Wolf, where she was approaching me for an information interview. We went for coffee because this was 15 years ago and pre-COVID, and that's something people still did, was go for coffee to chat. I know it's less and less common now. You can also do these online, like a Zoom call, or you can do them over the phone. It doesn't really matter which format you use. You just want to make sure you can book some time with somebody and have a nice casual conversation about what's going on. When do you do it? Do it before you're desperate for a new job. This stuff does not turn around a job in a week. So sometimes this can take a month or 2 or 3. It just really depends on what's going on with the job the job market. And this is not a quick solution. If you are desperate for work, and I said this in the workshop yesterday, don't have hidden job market tactics be the only thing you do. If you're really desperate for work, also carpet bomb the job sites. Go ahead, throw your resume out there. You might get lucky. You might find an amazing job that way. This method is more complicated. It's going to get you better jobs, and it's going to get you higher quality work, and it's going to find you jobs that are not on those job boards. But this is not a quick way to find a job. So start now. If you're even thinking about changing jobs, start this process. And why do you do it? So there's 4 things that I really say are key that you're going to get out of these information interviews. One is to secure warm introductions to potential employers. So you might have a conversation. Well, in the example I gave yesterday, so Lisa Wolf came to me and she's like, One of the things she'd said was, I'm interested in working in the utility space. Do you know anyone in the utility space? And I did. I had a client who was a liquid natural gas distributor that I knew very, very well. And I asked her, well, she asked me for an intro, and I said, well, who do you want to talk to? And she said, frankly, anyone who knows you really, really well and would be willing to just basically, what's the warmest lead you can give me there? And one of the people that worked there was my good friend Michelle, who, we've known each other longer than I've known my wife, been friends for a long time. We share a birthday, very strong connection there. And it was easy for me to make that connection. And then Lisa was able to leverage that into an actual interview. And I believe they actually created a job for her. But that's what she got out of doing this, was a warm introduction from me to someone that could help her find a job. You also want to build stronger relationships in your network to secure work in the future. Even if you're having an information interview with somebody who can't help you right this minute, they might be able to help you a couple years down the road when you need help with something else. It's never a bad investment to put some care and attention into nurturing your network, and these information interviews are something that can do that. So don't be shy to do this kind of stuff. It's also a great opportunity to learn more about a potential career path. Like, you might be thinking about changing, or you might be thinking about moving into a more senior role in an industry that you're already working in. What a wonderful opportunity to talk to folks who have been doing it, to kind of say like, hey, well, how did you do it? Or what should I know? What should I learn? Which goes to that fourth point, is this is a great opportunity to get advice about career progression, about maybe niches within an industry that you weren't aware of. You might talk to somebody and they go, well, have you ever thought about doing, account management or diversity, equity, and inclusion advisor in the utility space? And you'd be like, oh man, I didn't even think of that as something that people do in that space. But yeah, you're right. I guess that would be a job. So these information interviews are never a poor use of your time. And I think what we always want to make sure, and we're going to talk about more, is making sure that it's a good use of the person you're interviewing's time, because they're giving of themselves, right? They're giving you some of their time. Everybody's time is precious. So you want to make sure that you're respectful of that, and not making them regret making the time to talk to you. So we'll get into that. We talked a little bit about this already. So when you're doing an information interview, don't ask for a job, ask for advice. Ask about how they got into the industry and how they feel about it. Ask what kind of qualifications does somebody need to get into this industry, because you might be wondering about that. Frankly, just ask what the current job market's like. I don't think that's an inappropriate question to ask, because, it's, even though you're not asking for a job, you don't have to be coy about the fact that you're looking for a job. Like, be clear with them. I'm looking for a job. I'm not asking you for a job, but I'm in a career exploration mode. Whatever way you want to phrase it. Like, be clear that you're interested in a new job. You're just not asking them to hand you a job. It's a bit of a delicate balance. So don't be coy about telling them that you need a job. And go ahead and ask them, like, do they know anyone who might be interested in hiring someone like you? One of the jobs that I got, that's exactly what I did. I said, look, I want to work in this field. Do you know anybody who's hiring? And it was my old undergrad thesis advisor. And he said, yeah, actually, I was just talking to this guy over at the Science Council of BC, and he's looking to hire an analyst, and I would be happy to recommend you for that. And I had that talk with the guy, and I think 3 days later I was offered the job, and that was it. It went very quickly. But it's because I asked him directly, like, can you point me at somebody who's hiring? Now, I know we're moving quickly, but I want to make sure we leave lots of time for the questions. So how do you prepare for an information interview? I'm going to do some do's and don'ts. So make sure you look up everything you can about the person giving you the interview, their company, and the industry, because the opposite side of this is you don't want to ask anything in the information interview that can be easily looked up online. So to get back to that point I was trying to make about being respectful of people's time, don't go into an information interview and go, so tell me what your company does. Good God, what an insulting question to ask. Because I would expect if somebody is doing an information interview with me, I have a website. There's tons of information about me online. Go look that shit up before you come talk to me. Don't ask me really low bar questions that you could have easily, because that's wasting my time. Do make sure you prepare questions based on what you've learned about it. And the flip side of that is don't make them drive the conversation. You're the one interviewing them. So you come with the agenda, you come with the questions. Don't make them do all the heavy lifting to drive the conversation. Make it easy for them. So the do is be respectful of their time. The don't is don't show up late. Get there early. I'm half German, so I tend to get to things like half an hour before I need to be there and just sit awkwardly in the parking lot until it's time. But I'm never late I'm very rarely late for a meeting. Sometimes, like traffic accidents or whatnot jam up traffic and I always call ahead, but try to make sure you're on time or early. And be clear on your intent. So when I talked earlier about, being clear that you're looking for a job, just be crystal clear on what you're looking for, including don't ask for a job and say that. Say like, I'm not asking you for a job and even when you're trying to set up that interview, be clear about that. I'm not asking you for a job because that puts people on guard and they're a lot less likely to talk to you or spend time with you if they think that you're just trying to leverage this to get them to hire you. Now, dress appropriately. This is something I always struggle with because I come from the trades originally and dressing up never feels great. But in the post-COVID era, frankly, nobody wears ties anymore. It was my observation. So you don't need to wear a tie. I certainly don't recommend you wear a suit or a pantsuit if you're a woman. Just dress clean and nice. Don't wear t-shirts. Wear a shirt with a collar. Wear a polo. If you're a woman, wear a fitted shirt. Wear nice slacks or even nice jeans. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with wearing nice jeans because you really don't want to be too formal. If you show up looking like you're here for a job interview, you're going to make them uncomfortable because you should have been super clear at this point that you're not asking them for a job. So don't set up that vibe when you show up by wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase and looking like a tool. So, also, look, I know when you're looking for a job, sometimes you don't have a lot of money. At least be prepared to offer to pay. A lot of times if they know you're in a jam, kind people that will agree to this will buy you coffee or they'll buy you lunch. Do not expect that. Be prepared if you're inviting them out for a coffee or a meal, you need to be prepared to pay. So make sure you do that. And if you're meeting with somebody online or virtually, I always think it's a nice touch to send like a $5 or a $10 coffee card via email. That's easy to do, right? You can send a Starbucks card or you can send a Tim Hortons card or a Dunkin' Donuts card if you're in the US. It's just an easy, low-hanging thing as a small thank you. Like I had somebody do this recently. I did some testimonial videos for a channel partner of mine, and they sent me a $25 gift card. They didn't have to do that, but it was such a nice, kind thing to do. It made me have warm and fuzzy feelings about them. So definitely think about doing something like that. And don't forget to follow up after you have these. Send a thank you note, whatever that looks like. So this is this is how you prepare for an interview. There's things that you need to do. But while you're getting ready for the logistics of it, like being on time, all that kind of stuff, those first couple of points about looking up everything you can about the person and the company, that's what we're going to talk about next, which is the gathering intel point here. So one of the things I like to do is to create a briefing. And now this is nerdy and it's a little stalkerish. Like I have people in my life who will go, oh my God, dude, like you have a dossier on people that you're meeting with. And I kind of do. It's maybe mildly creepy, but it helps me organize my thoughts and prepare for meetings, right? So in the red box on the right, I've got an example. Now, this is not real information. This is I actually had ChatGPT make a fake dossier so that I wasn't doxing anyone in real life. But this is exactly the kind of information that I would gather about a company. So you want information on the individual, which is what at the top of that red box. You want some information on the company. And what's not seen here is some more information on business objectives. So if you have the chance to, we'll get into this in later slides, but like if a company's publicly traded, they'll have an annual report published online, which talks about their strategy, what's happening, pain points, market position, all this kind of stuff. For privately held companies, you're gonna have to dig a little bit more to get that information, but I'll tell you how to do that. PESTEL analysis. PESTEL is an acronym that stands for political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental. So the thumb, that's not an afterthought. You should be out here. But So a pestle analysis is a way for you to do a little bit of research on the external stuff that's happening around the company, right? So an example, we talked about energy companies before, right? So let's say you're looking at Pacific Gas and Electric in California. So California is a jurisdiction that has some pretty strict environmental guidelines around energy, anything that could emit pollution, right? So I would, if I'm talking to an energy company in California, I would be looking at the P, which is political, to see, is there any pieces of legislation that have just been announced or that are coming down the pipeline that would affect that company's ability to operate. So like a fine for doing certain things wrong, or like maybe more transparent accounting principles, whatever that is. You just want to be aware of that. So when you're having a conversation with somebody about what's going on in your world, you look like a smart cookie because you've looked up some stuff and you know what's happening in their world. Let me tell you, that impresses the shit out of people. Like if you're talking their language, it kind of makes you seem like an insider. And I don't want this to sound shady, but in these information interviews, you want to come across as best as you can. So if you have done your homework, like I'm suggesting here, and you know stuff that your average bear on the street would not know, you're going to sound like an insider. You're going to sound like somebody that they can have rapport with very quickly. They're going to trust you very quickly because, okay, this person knows what they're talking about when it comes to my industry. So it's well worth doing that bit of extra homework. ChatGPT, for example, is excellent at doing pestle analysis. You can just go and say, hey, I'm going to be talking to a company that makes bicycles in Colorado, and I want to, can you do a pestle analysis for me on this specific company or the bicycle manufacturing industry in general? I need to know what's going on. And ChatGPT is actually pretty good at cranking out a high level briefing on that. So when I was at the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce event in Denver, Colorado last fall, I was teaching some of my fellow Canadian delegates to that conference how to do this kind of stuff. And one of them got quite panicked. He's like, oh my God, I've got a meeting with Target or something tomorrow. I haven't done this. I don't have the time to do this. I whoa. Like, I promise this can be done in 20 minutes. This is not something you need to spend 8 hours on. This is something you spend 20 to 30 minutes on. You just need the high level talking points. You don't need to go all Fox Mulder on them and start like trying to get samples of their DNA or hair or anything like that. Like just high level stuff, right? I also think it's a good idea to have an idea of key contacts that you can ask for an intro to. So if, let's say, you want to work in the HR department, you should have some idea of who the head of the HR, who's a decision maker in the HR team at that company. So then if your contact that you're doing the warm interview with says, well, I'd love to introduce you to some people. Like, do you have anybody in mind? Have a few names at your fingertips that you can trot out. So your briefing document that you make before going into one of these information interviews will cover this kind of stuff. Now, again, don't spend more than 20 or 30 minutes on this. Leverage AI tools, just quick and dirty, but you want to make sure you got some good talking points going into that meeting. So what are you looking for? This is so in all this intel that you're gathering, there has to be something specific that you're looking for. I use the word hooks a lot. So a hook is like back in the day when they would have, hello, my honey, hello, my darling. And they had that, in the cartoons, Bugs Bunny, and they have that hook that comes off stage to and get you off stage. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for an attention getter. We're looking for something that's going to make that person sit up. I love when I drop a hook and somebody sits up straighter and they're making better eye contact with you, or maybe I love it when their eyebrows go towards their headline or their hairline. That means I've caught them with my hook. And so to figure out what that hook is going to be, you need some information on that interviewee's background. So, what is it? I'm going to talk about some potential hooks in the next slide, but you're looking for something that's going to capture their attention. So maybe it's you saying, hey, I know something really interesting about your industry that I would love to share with you, or I'm going to this conference that they hadn't heard of, or here's a piece of information that's going to make your life easier. Whatever that thing is, there are hooks that you got to think about. But my advice would be, if you can't come up with a specific hook, you almost don't want to do that meeting, because then it becomes a very generic conversation about, I'm looking for work, I need your help, thank you for meeting with me. It's not going to leave a lasting impression with the person that you're doing the information interview with. That's the thing that you want to do. You want that person that you have the information interview with to be an advocate for you. And if they're going to be an advocate for you, they need a reason to be an advocate for you. So you want them to say things like, oh, I met this Peggy person and she is so smart, really sharp, really seems to have done her homework and knows a bunch about the industry. I think you would love to have a conversation with her. It'd be a good use of your time. That's to get to that. You need to have a hook. You need something that gets their attention, right? So you want to make sure that hook is something that would excite or interest the interviewee. Like if you're really into animal husbandry, and this has nothing to do with dog breeding or horse breeding or anything like that, you might be excited about your, prize-winning King Charles Spaniel. But if they're not, that's not a good hook. The hook has to be relevant to the person that you're having the interview with. So you got to put some thought into this and kind of go, what would be a good hook? What would grab their attention? What is their interest? Are they trying to get ahead in their career? Are they trying to look good? There's a book that's now over 100 years old that has a lot of really good stuff in it. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Obviously, I think I talked about this yesterday too. There is a section in it that's quite misogynistic, so you want to skip that part. I think the new editions cut that out about the woman's place in the world and all this, thank God, because it was really cringy. But there is some stuff in there that could help you think about hooks, right? To say, literally it's in the title of the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. The book talks about psychological motivators that help people connect with you. And this hook is about connection. How do you connect with that person and have them speak glowingly of you and want to refer you to people because it's going to make them look good. So that's why you need the hook. Who are we looking for? We're looking to connect with people from a department or specific people that you'd like to meet inside a network or an industry or a specific company. So make sure you're targeting the right people and make sure you have a good hook. So let's talk about hook examples, because you might be going, oh God, like I don't know if I can think of a hook. So I want to give you some examples, but when you do go through this process, I want you to spend some significant time thinking about hooks. Like really, really try to go into every information interview with a good solid hook in your head that you think can work. So these hook examples are actually aligned to the kinds of psychological motivators that you're going to find in How to Win Friends and Influence People, that book that I mentioned. So I wanted to make sure that they align so that this makes sense. So a personal connection would be, I'm genuinely fascinated about your career journey, how you transitioned, how do you navigate. So you're puffing up their ego, making them seem good. Sometimes it's something you have in common. I remember when I got a job at BC Hydro, which is our local electrical utility, I noticed that the guy interviewing me had a picture of a woman with a newborn on his desk. And I said to him, oh, I've got little kids at home. Like, when did you guys have your kids? And it turns out he was in the same ward at Children and Women's Hospital as me and my wife was. And I actually remember him walking his wife in laps around the maternity ward because she was having this long, drawn-out labor. So I'm not saying the fact that our wives were having kids in the hospital at the exact same time was the thing that nailed it, but it did sure warm him up to me. And we had a bit of a personal conversation about that experience. It was a shared experience that we had. So sometimes you're looking for shared experiences for that personal connection. So that might be interest in a sport. It might be pets. It might be children. It might be the love of cooking. It might be you went to the same school or studied the same thing. But that's a hook is that you can use to try and find that personal connection to really solidify the relationship. Another hook is to make them feel like they're part of this learning journey that you're on, because they probably themselves feel like they're on a journey or have been on a journey at some point to grow their career, to navigate. And again, this is like puffing their ego up a bit. So, what have you learned? Like, you're this amazing thing. You want to make sure before you stick your foot in it that you know a little bit about what their journey has been. So, I made this mistake recently with somebody that I was talking to, where they said, "Yeah, I had this bad experience with an employer," and I said, "Oh, well, have you live in this place? Have you considered this other major employer that I have really good relationships with?" And it turns out that was the employer that had screwed her around. And if I'd taken 2 seconds to look at her LinkedIn profile, I would have gone, "Oh, you used to work there." So obviously that was a stupid thing to recommend that she. So if there was a hook there, this wasn't an information interview, but if that was a hook, I blew it, right? Because I didn't take the time to understand her career journey and put my foot in it and said something stupid. A shared passion is, like maybe volunteer work or working with kids or pets. Again, it can be a shared passion is like hobbies or work related things that you're really excited about. Flattery is something you have to be very careful with because that can come across as very insincere. So if you are going to use the flattery angle, make sure that you mean it. So it's not coming across like, "Oh my God, I love that work that you did on that bridge proposal." Like they're going to go, who gets excited about bridge proposals? Like this is really putting on airs versus, like I have a friend who runs a interior design firm out in Toronto. And him and his business partner have done some incredible stuff with reaching out to at-risk youth in the neighborhood. And that was a great, again, this wasn't an information interview. He just married my best friend. So, it was more like a personal connection. But I sincerely felt like the work that they were doing in the community was incredible. And I wanted to talk about that with him and go, wow, like you guys are doing some amazing stuff. So, for a lot of companies or a lot of individuals, it's actually their volunteer work or their pro bono work that they're going to get most excited about rather than their day job. So if you see something like that they did that you think was awesome, that's pretty safe. But you need to believe in your own heart that what they did was awesome. Otherwise, it's going to come across as insincere. So don't just pick some random thing out. "Oh my God, I love that you got the City of Toronto account. That was awesome." They're going to be like, okay. Ask for some sage advice. And this is, again, comes back to the how to win friends and influence people. When you're asking somebody for a favor, it actually in some ways obligates them to you because you are putting them up on a bit of a pedestal and saying, "I see you as an expert. I see you as somebody that I can learn from. So please, tell me about your wisdom," right? And so you say, "With all your experience, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I respect your experience," those kind of things. So don't be shy to butter them up a little bit. Again, just don't do it insincerely. Try to do it as naturally and organically as possible. So the market intel side. So what is it? So I talked a bit about pestle analysis already. So you want to get some facts about their external market. What's happening in the political climate around them? Are there any pieces of legislation that's going to come bite them in the ass sometime soon? Is the economy hurting their business? Like in the last, one of the reasons we're probably all here looking at this is because so many people have been laid off recently because of the economy being wonky. So be aware of how economic conditions are impacting what industry or business they're in. Also, try to be aware of social trends. So right now in Canada, we've got a pretty serious boycott action trying to happen against some of the biggest grocery chains. So if you were to go talk to Loblaws, don't pretend you should know about the boycott and maybe don't talk about it, but don't pretend like it's not happening. That's probably not smart. You should also know technology tends to be a disruption in a lot of industries. So make sure that you can talk intelligently about potential technology trends that are happening and how it might impact their business. Also, competitive intelligence, who are their competitors, and you should know who that is, especially if one of them is up and coming and nipping at their heels. Figure out who that is. Maybe do a bit of media monitoring, look at what's being said in the news. And like I did with the Hive, do some light industrial espionage. So I did it in the form of secret shopping. Don't break into anybody's business at night. I can't advocate for that, but I've done things like phoning around on voicemail systems in the middle of the night when nobody's there and seeing it says Aaron Abrams, head of HR. And then I write everything down very quickly and kind of like figure out the org charts. And when I call back the next day, I say, "Hey, can you put me through to Frank?" And Frank might be the head of HR. The gatekeepers at that business are much more likely to put you through than if you say, "I'd like to talk to the head of HR," because then they know you're fishing for something rather than someone that Frank probably already knows. So little tricks like that. So easy sources of market intel. For bigger companies, publicly traded companies, they're going to have annual reports online. Those are a gold mine, especially the director's notes. The director's notes part of the annual report is really where they outline the stuff that keeps them up at night. So there's some real valuable information in there. I mentioned earlier using AI tools like ChatGPT. So you can ask ChatGPT to generate some analysis for you on what's happening in their world. And I would also check like Google News, which is a news aggregator, to see what's been written about that company. There might be some useful information in there. Now, smaller companies are not going to have annual reports published, and there's probably not going to be a lot written about them in the news. So you're going to have to go for more stuff that's on their website and more generic information about their industry. And frankly, most smaller companies will not necessarily would expect you to have heard of them. I own a small business. I never expect people to know who I am. It's not a reasonable expectation, but you should look at their website, see what they got on there, what kind of services they offer, what products they sell, who works there, how many people there are, roughly that kind of stuff. There are also industry reports that are out there online that are based on NAICS codes, which is National Occupation Industry Classification System. But if you figure out what NAICS code, it's like a 5-digit code they're in, you can look for reports on that NAICS code that will tell you general industry trends. That's always good. And industry association reports. So in the last workshop, we talked a lot about the power of industry associations. A lot of industry associations publish free research on their website. Go read that stuff. Figure out like if it's signage or it's farm market type stuff. Find out what's happening in their world and read up on it. Now, let's figure out how to prepare for the interview. So what do you do with the intel? So you're going to build your dossier. We talked about that dossier and outlined all those things. You want to figure out your specific hooks for the meeting. You're going to get on LinkedIn, look at the company website, figure out who your best connections are. And you might even want to go as far as to try and warm up some of those connections if you're on LinkedIn by liking some of their posts and following them. That gets you on their radar, and because they'll see that you like their posts and followed them. And then if your name comes up later, they're going to go, oh, right, Annie. Yeah, I think I heard of her. Yeah, where do I know that name from? Doesn't matter. As long as they've heard of you somewhere, that's a good start. So you want to assemble your dossier. In it, you're going to put your interview questions, notes about things that you want to mention, specifically your hook, and specific introductions that you're hoping they can make for you. So those are the 3 key things that you want to have in your meeting notes or dossier. And I know some people think that it's rude or somehow inappropriate to be taking notes. I actually would say it's the opposite. When somebody takes notes when I'm talking to them in one of these interviews, that is a sign of respect to me. That means that they're taking the information I'm giving them very seriously. So if you're someone who takes notes on paper, bring a pen and paper. If you're someone that takes notes digitally, use your smartphone. I have a note-taking app. One of the things I'll tell you one of my tricks. If I'm using the note-taking app, when I'm done taking notes on what they're saying, I lay it down on the counter in front of them or the table so they can see that I'm in a note-taking app and I'm not screwing around on Instagram or something like that. So don't be super coy about taking notes because you want to capture that information. Now, the interview. I don't want to go into a ton of depth on that. Everybody's got their own style for how to do these interviews. You have your own preferences, the way you talk, the way you show up. Just make sure you're prepped, you show up, you're clean, you don't smell like roadkill, and that you've done your homework to figure that out. Now, the interview, things are going to happen. Maybe that person's going to say, hey, I would like to introduce you to this person over here, follow up with them. You probably should have their contact information, like an email or whatever, and say, okay, I'm gonna follow up with you about this. And if they ask you to send anything, make sure that you send it like a follow up material. Then the follow up. So I do a process, and this comes from the intelligence community, called hot washing. So you're going to make a list of people that you've met with, and you want to divide that list up between people who can help you and people that can't. Like you might pick someone to go have an information interview with thinking that they're going to be helpful. And then you have that conversation and you realize, like, I've had conversations like this before where I thought somebody, because they'd been in an industry for 20 or 30 years, were going to be super well connected. And I was wrong on that. They might go, oh yeah, I don't really leave my office. I don't really know anybody. I'm doing this and doing that. They're kind of like, the professional equivalent of hermits. Those people are not going to be helpful for you. So you have to be polite about it, but just don't don't spend a lot of time pursuing people who are not going to be able to help you. So people who are nice to have met but aren't going to help lead you to work, just be polite but move on. So then you end up with a short list of people that you do want to get back to, and in the hidden job market workshop, I'd suggested Lisa Wolf's methodology of putting together a discrete mailing list and actually emailing people every 7 to 10 days with some updates on your situation and like a bulleted list that says, I need introductions to the following companies. So if you find someone that's good, ask them before the end of the interview if you can email them as follow-up, but actually follow through and do that. It makes it really easy for them to help you. Now, a follow-up deck, you don't have to do this, and this is actually one that I use at my company. So this is specific to sales, but you can do one for yourself, right? So I recommend 7 slides. So have some name dropping, put up some logos of organizations that you have experience with or you've worked with. Tell your story, do a little mini bio, do a capability sheet, like say, here's the things I'm awesome at. So in the last workshop, we talked about doing this Ikigai exercise of making a list of things that you're good at and people would be willing to pay you for. Maybe you put together a slide in your deck that says, here's the stuff that I'm awesome at, so that they can orient themselves towards things that you're good at. If you got case studies that you want to share about work that you did, like in this case, my case study is work that my firm did, but you could do a case study about some professional work or volunteer work that you did that shows off what you're good at. I don't think that's a terrible idea. Also want to talk about your impact, what makes you special, because everybody's capable at some degree. Like if you can get out of bed every morning and find your ass with both hands, you've done better than 50% of the population sometimes. So you want to highlight something that you're really good at that other people aren't good at. And lastly, you want to end with your contact info, because this deck is something that people could pass around to people that they know. Say, hey, I met this Iris person. She's awesome. And she sent me this cute deck that says all about why Iris is awesome. And so I want to send that to you, and I think you should meet her. And so it's good to give people tools to help advocate and market you. Now, we're pretty much at the end of this workshop. I want to go over the key takeaways. So pick your targets carefully. Don't just randomly reach out and start networking with folks. Make sure that the people that you're networking with have some realistic ability to help you out in your career search. Do your research. Make sure you have a hook. We talked a lot about hooks. Make sure you have a good hook. You've done your research. You understand how that hook is going to hook the person that you want to talk to. And know who you want to liaise with, and stalk them a little bit before you meet with them. So, not the illegal stalking, the light stalking, like look them up on Google, look them up on LinkedIn. Make sure you put your hook into your pitch. Don't be coy about it. Make sure that your pitch is good. And when you're delivering your pitch in these information interviews, again, be clear on what you're looking for. Like, hey, I'm looking for work. I need warm introductions. Here's why you should give me warm introductions. And then follow up with that meeting with information specific to them. That is what I was suggesting, is doing this follow-up deck. So you don't have to do this. I think it's a nice thing to do and a helpful thing to do. So that is it for the talk today.